There are a couple features that we're going to go over in the week ahead that's going to be dominating our weather setups. Overall, we got the ridge of high pressure that's locked over a good part of the northwest and the western regions, but this persistent northwest flow has been alive and prevalent, and that's been inundating the state of Texas with system after system, taking advantage of the abundance amount of Gulf moisture it's able to tap into. And then yet we had another MCV, a mesoscale convective complex, blow up in the overnight hours, and unfortunately left another 6, 10, even a foot of rain in some spots. But then it's also been very wet along the East Coast and along the Carolinas, much of the mid-Atlantic, and yet there's a more increased water vapor that's going to be impacting that region later this afternoon into the evening time frame. Then further south, we have a little tropical feature that we got to keep our eye on. This is an area of low pressure. It's a wave that's going to be coming across Florida and eventually get into the southeastern portions of the Gulf. So overall, here's the setup. We've got the ridge of high pressure out west. We've got another little ridge out here on the southeast. Look at the steady stream. This is deep tropical moisture. And that's one of the reasons why our water content values have been so high. You had little to no cap in place, and that produced some of those 2 and 3 inch per hour rainfall rates and left the devastating flooding in its wake. But you can also see there's another feature further to the north. This one's going to impact areas of the mid-Atlantic later into the afternoon, into the evening time frame, with more heavy rain for them. And then, of course, we've got the little tropical feature, the wave that's going to be moving across the state of Florida and eventually head into the Gulf Coast region. So overall, the breakdown of the heat advisories and the overall extreme heat watches are going to be locked over a good part of Northern California, much of Nevada, getting into portions of the Pacific Northwest. If the heat really cranks, we've got the flood watches continuing for Central Texas, portions of East Texas as well. And then we have a renewed flood watch for areas into Virginia, into the DC region, as well as into upstate New York, back into getting into Pennsylvania this afternoon. So overall, here's the overall setup. Over the next 24 hours, we've got, unfortunately, more heavy rain that could spark renewed generation of showers and thunderstorms and some flash flooding possible continuing for them. And we have the increased water vapor that's going to be impacting a good part of the mid-Atlantic and portions of the areas of into Virginia. And we also have another piece of energy that's going to be impacting portions of Missouri, back into Illinois, as well as in portions of Indiana. And of course, the monsoonal flow has been alive and prevalent for a good part of New Mexico, but actually not into Arizona. So overall, as we head into tomorrow, it's kind of going to be a similar setup as of today. You got the ridge of high pressure. There is the weakness underneath with all the cloud cover out of the southern plains, keeping the temperatures below average and really unsettled for them. But notice the blue over the top. That is a pretty strong cold front just waiting on its wing and a trigger to head southbound. And I do feel it's going to be starting to head southbound as we head into Wednesday and especially into Thursday. It's actually going to feel really nice up there into the Dakotas and portions of Wyoming and Montana. But overall, the setup as we head into tomorrow afternoon, heading into Tuesday afternoon, there is the tropical wave moving across Florida. We've got some heavier rains that's going to be impacting a good part of Florida, especially into central and southern Florida. That's where the northwest flow is kind of stops with those cool fronts, if you will. And then, of course, we'll be watching that stronger cold front that will be pressing southbound. But overall, we've got the same persistent setup for today, tomorrow, really into Tuesday, as that tropical feature will be moving across Florida with those heavier flash flooding events. We have the abundance amount of rain that's going to be impacting the East Coast. We should have those flood watches likely to continue. And then the northwest flow will be alive and prevalent again, probably the last day for the deep south. But so you still have another 2 days to contend with as you heat it up in the afternoon, producing those showers and thunderstorms that could turn into some flash flooding producers. But overall, as the tropics goes, there is the wave. Now, of course, the Climate Prediction Center has been talking about this for the last 7 days, hinting at that July 16th through the 22nd timeframe of something to develop. And sure enough, the National Hurricane Center came out yesterday, put out a 20% probability. We're getting a little bit closer to that range, and that's becoming a little bit more verification on most of the models and the ensembles. So the National Hurricane Center went ahead and put out a 20% probability of that wave coming across and trying to develop off there into the deep coast states into the middle of next week. But look at the cold front, folks. Yeah, you're going to feel this in a big way, especially if you live in Montana, getting into the Dakotas, back into Wyoming, portions of Nebraska. It is going to be feeling chilly, actually, in some areas, especially for summer standards. But that's also going to be bringing a renewed threat for showers and thunderstorms along with it as well. And of course, we'll still have the heavier rain to contend with that tropical wave as it comes across Florida and sneaks in off the coast. And overall on the surface map, there's where the rain set up as we head into Wednesday. I think we start drying out over a good part of the middle part of the country, and the east remains wet, complements of that tropical type feature. And then we'll still have the northwest flow, but it's going to be shifting over a little bit and be more predominant across the Ohio Valley and much of the mid-Atlantic as well. But look at the temperatures as we wake up into Thursday morning. Yeah, this is not a misprint, folks. We're talking 40s on the map for portions of Idaho, Montana, getting into Wyoming, the Dakotas, and in Nebraska. Yeah, that is not going to feel like a summer morning by any stretch of the imagination. But notice where the cold front stops. Pretty much Kansas really doesn't make it into Oklahoma, which is not like that unusual for July, right? But here's the setup going into Friday. So all eyes are going to be on this little tropical type feature. So most of the ensembles have this kind of remaining on the weak side. Of course, if it's along the coast, it'll spread that deep tropical moisture inland, especially into Louisiana, back into Mississippi and Alabama, getting into Georgia. You have the northwest flow, and this is where it likely stops with that cold front dropping across a good part of Kansas, Missouri, back into the Ohio Valley. Rainy, pretty continued rainy for the mid-Atlantic and much of the east coast. But look at Texas starts to dry out, and the monsoonal flow will continue for New Mexico. So if you break down the ensembles for the European guidance, it only really has a couple members and actually continues to remain on the weaker side. With those, even the ones that are actually showing it, shows a weak tropical entity likely trying to spread into Louisiana with some heavier rains. The GFS maybe a little bit more bullish on the system, but overall it still remains on the overall weaker side, but spreading those tropical type rains off a good part of the deep coast states. But the outlier is the Icon model, and this is definitely an outlier because it actually really kind of rapidly increases this whatever tries to come out of the Gulf Coast there into potentially a hurricane. Now, of course, this is way an outlier, but I'm just kind of showing you this because it takes an kind of an unusual track, if you will, because it's feeling the ridge of high pressure to the north, and it rides under that ridge. So not only does it intensify, it tries to keep it moving, basically from east to west. That would be a fairly unusual type movement, but nonetheless, that's what's kind of showing now. But it is an outlier at the moment of what we're working with before this even tries to cross over into portions of the Gulf. So overall, the blend looks like this. So it's more or less favoring that system to remain just offshore or right there along the coast, dumping the spreading heavy rains into New Orleans, good part of Mobile, those places in Pensacola, Destin, much of Florida obviously will be inundated with the heavier rains from this system. You've got the northwest flow continuing. You have these systems still coming across at least through Tuesday for a good part of the southern plains. Of course, much of the mid-Atlantic and the northeast remains wet, and then we'll be watching a cold front by the middle part of the week will be bringing increased rain showers for a good part of the northern plains. But most of the guidance in the Climate Prediction Center has the ridge of high pressure trying to build and shut the taps off a good part of Texas and Oklahoma, where they've been really wet as of late. So of course the outlier is that icon model if it tries to come within that ridge, but most of the guidance, at least at the moment right now, has the ridge really starting to build in across a good part of the deep south and much of Texas as you're starting to go into your hottest time of the year. And of course that would likely include triple digits, and where the weakness would be and where the storm threat would be, and most of the northwest flow storm track would likely end up as across much of the Dakotas, much of areas of the northern plains, getting into Wisconsin, Iowa, and back into northern Illinois. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch the next update. Wire protect you before and after the storm.